This ESPN podcast is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't
The
care.
BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the Sports Guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. Monday morning here on the West Coast. Monday afternoon back in the East Coast. Zach Lowe from Grantland on the line. He went to Indiana, New York yesterday. I gotta say, I thought Indiana was gonna get killed in this series. I just didn't see it. And especially because of their bench. I didn't totally love the way they played in that Atlanta series. And after watching one game, it's a total flip-flop from my side. I think Indiana has a real chance to win. You were on this pretty early. You loved their defense. It's interesting. You said you spent some time with Frank Vogel like a month ago, and you said this guy is really confident. And I filed that away, like thinking, like sometimes coaches are just confident. But there was something about what you saw in his eyes that made you think that this Pacers team might be a real thing. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, it was that, and it was also just, I think because of the way that Melo finished the season and that it's the Knicks and the Pacers play in a small town, I think there was this perception that, like, the Knicks were significantly better than the Pacers, and they just weren't. I mean, in the regular season, the Knicks and Pacers had almost the exact same scoring margin. The Knicks just were a really good offensive team, and the Pacers were a really good defensive team, but sort of qualitatively, they're almost the same team. And I think that for some reason, because of New York, I guess, the Knicks were considered favorites. And I thought that they were very equal teams and that this would be a good series. And as for Vogel, I just remember asking him, does it bother you that if you face a team like New York or Miami, you have these two big lumbering guys in West and Hibbert, and you have totally not gone the small ball route at all? And you're going to face Melo at power forward, and that makes you bend your defense in all sorts of weird ways, like putting West on Iman Shumpert or something. And he just literally looked at me and laughed. And he was like, we do that all the time. We're comfortable with it. And we like to play that way. And literally he said, we like it. Like he was licking his chops for this matchup. He thinks his team can win this series, and he's comfortable playing big against small. And he sort of likes that being big and physical and tough is part of their identity. And he's going to enjoy watching Hansbrough and David West beat the hell out of Melo in the post.
Yeah, that was the one thing that really jumped out yesterday was against just about every team, you can play Carmelo at the 4 and it's not going to hurt you. There are a couple teams where it's going to hurt you a little bit and it's going to wear him down on that end. And Indiana is definitely one of those teams. I think Memphis would be another team that would be like that. But I just thought, first of all, J.R. Smith hasn't been the same since he elbowed Jason Terry in the head. He really has. I don't even think he's played a good quarter since that happened. And, when you think about the advantage on paper that their bench would have against Indiana's bench would be one of the big things that you would pick the Knicks with. But if he's not playing well, they're not going to win this series. And then you look at Jason Kidd, who's just, I don't know. I mean, that was the guy who shot, what did he shoot, 50% that 1 month from threes? Now he won't shoot anymore, as you wrote about in your blog post today. I don't know if maybe this Knicks bench, maybe it's not an advantage. Can they win if their bench doesn't come through?
I mean, they can't win if J.R. Smith shoots whatever he's been shooting in the last 2 or 3 games, and they get literally a 0 from Kidd. But the Pacers bench has been very bad for the last 2 seasons, and it's a weakness. Despite how it looked yesterday, it's a weakness for them, and they're just going to have. It's a weakness they have to just negotiate game by game. Who does Hansbrough look like he's ready to play more minutes and sort of beat up Melo in the post? Does Mahinmi look like he's ready to play more? Do we unearth Pendergraph or Gerald Green or one of these guys? The Pacers bench is bad, and it's worse than the Knicks bench. But the Knicks can't win with JR shooting 25%. And the interesting thing is now, Kenyon Martin is making noise today about, we got to play big against these guys. We got to put me and Tyson out there together, shift Melo to small forward. And that's why this series is so interesting, sort of who blinks first, who punts whatever advantage they think they have in the small versus big thing. And, we've talked about already that Melo's getting beat up in the post, but these guys split the regular season series, and the sort of damage from big versus small was equal on both sides. Melo can beat up Paul George. David West is sort of taken out of the defense to hide somewhere on the perimeter, or they have to put West on Melo, and Melo can blow by him. And there's all sorts of issues that go both ways, but it is an interesting sort of who blinks first battle here.
Yeah, and the other thing, DJ Augustine was amazing yesterday. 5 for 6, 4 for 5 from 3. That might not happen again in the playoffs. He might not go 2 for 5 from 3 the rest of the playoffs. And you contrast that with J.R. Smith going 4 for 15. And, that's your point swing right there, basically. Hibbert was out of his mind in the second half. And as you pointed out, not somebody that people were even considering for a top 5 defensive player of the year. I think people generally feel Marc Gasol is probably the best defensive center now. I would say Noah would be second, Dwight Howard third, and then so on down the line. What Hibbert did yesterday was as good as anything Joakim Noah or Marc Gasol is going to do. Can he keep that up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people were, he was angry that he fouled 5 times yesterday, and he said he needs to foul less. New York fans, of course, thought he committed a foul every single time he did anything
right
on the floor, and were chanting about how the refs were terrible, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, that's how I thought his, he clearly made a point in the second half to come out a little bit further on pick and rolls, and that's dicey for him because his footwork has to be perfect, sort of backpedaling all the way from the top of the key to the rim and still having the balance to go straight up. So he may slip a little bit, but look, I mean, he's been doing this all season. I mean, he's been one of the best defensive players all season. I was shocked he only finished 10th in Defensive Player of the Year, and part of that is because Gasol played so many more minutes than he did. But if he can stay out of foul trouble and protect the rim like that, the Pacers have a very, very good chance to win the series.
Sam Young was the 8th man last night. Jan Mahimny was the 9th man. That concerns me. It'd be really hard for me to believe the Pacers could make the Eastern Finals with a 7-man rotation, and 6 is Tyler Hansbrough and 7 is DJ Augustine. It's really a 5-man team. And the plus minus 5-man possession stats, their starting 5 was one of the best in the league, and every other combination just isn't as good. And, I don't see the Knicks being able to win this series unless they get something from their bench, which leads me to a very important question. Omari Stoudemire, who's pretty close by all accounts. Could he have a major impact on this series?
He could, I guess. In what direction that impact goes is unclear. I mean, I don't like the idea of just putting him out there without good conditioning and a lot of playing time of late and throwing him into this sort of very physical series. But, my take with Omari has been he's still a good offensive player, and he was very good this year in hunting out the right kinds of shots and being efficient and all of that. He's horrific on defense. Everyone knows that. I think he's even worse than people think. And if you put him and Melo out there together, it's not only takes you out of your small ball. If Tyson Chandler is also on the floor, it just becomes really hard to become a competent defensive team. And so my thing with Omari is he can absolutely have a role on the Knicks. I just think given his health issues, given that Melo at power forward has sort of been the centerpiece of their identity this year, that it's like a 10 to 12 minute spot, 7th, 8th man kind of role where he's the bench scorer, either as sort of the only big man on the floor or the pick and roll guy when Chandler's not out there and Melo's not out there. They get in trouble when they start overlapping their stars 2 and 3 at a time. And I just don't think this is the stage to sort of begin that experiment again. So that would worry me more than it would encourage me if I were a Knicks fan, honestly.
Yeah, I went from, maybe a week ago thinking, well, Omari, they won't mess with that. They'll just tell him to wait till next season. They don't want to mess up what they have, to thinking, wow, if you could get Omari for 2 7-minute blocks against Indiana's crappy bench, he could really have an impact.
But see, I don't trust the Knicks to do that. I think if he comes back, they run the danger of he's a big name. He's going to get 25, 28 minutes or whatever he was getting during the regular season. And that to me is just at this stage, you didn't have any time this season to play them all together and see how it could work defensively. I don't trust them to make him a 12-minute a game guy, but I agree that's what he should be.
So you think there's a desperation that would go with that would not behoove them?
Yeah, I mean, star players typically don't come back and play 12 minutes a game. And I don't know how many minutes Amari was playing on average this season. I think it was
like 22, 23, yeah.
That to me is still too many. I just think he should be on the floor as the go-to scorer when Melo isn't out there. And that's really, again, maybe next season is the time to see if it can work over a big minute stretch and, a lot of games. This season, they just didn't have the time to do that because of his injuries. And they basically became a different team. And I just don't like upsetting that apple cart in the conference semifinals against a really, really good team.
Melo's last 4 playoff games, 35 made field goals and 51, 75, 35 for 110. That's not good. Is that a bad slump, or is that something, or are our teams really starting to figure out how to play him?
I mean, I think Boston plays him very well, and they did in the regular season, and they did for 6 more games in the playoffs. They know how to defend him without helping too much, but still showing him a lot of help, confusing him, taking away passing lanes, and crowding him when he dribbles, but not earlier. They know how to defend him really well. The Pacers have different issues with him because they don't sort of have an ideal size and strength and speed defender to put against him. And again, we're doing small versus big, which wasn't an issue versus Boston, but they're a very good defensive team. And some of it is, I think, coaching. I think Mike Woodson has let the offense get out of whack in the playoffs.
I would agree.
Discipline. Huh?
I would agree. It's turned into ISO ball, which is exactly what wasn't great about what they were doing in the last 5 weeks of the season.
Well, and I mean, they played a lot of ISO ball in the regular season. They isolated almost more than any other team in the league. But
you know what I mean. The ball was flying around. When the Knicks are at their best, it's the ball movement that I thought made them special.
Yeah, they used isolations as a vehicle for ball movement. Yeah. And against Boston, and I don't think this was true last night. I think last night they sort of got back to the right moderation or something close to it. But Melo's been taking bad shots against good defenses, and he's not making them. And part of it is he was so hot in the last 15 games of the season that he was bound to have a slump, and now he's having a slump, and it's been exacerbated by good defense, bad offense, shaky coaching. I mean, the way they played, first of all, for them to almost lose Game 6 in Boston the way they lost it was like shocking. And they played that first round series. I mean, I lost a lot of faith I had in the Knicks. I would have picked the Knicks in this series against the Pacers had they played better against Boston. Boston was awful. Boston cannot score points at all. And they were in that series almost forcing a Game 7 to like an alarming degree.
Boston had basically 6 guys, if that. They had Paul Pierce who ran out of gas about midway through the series and was on fumes of the fumes of the fumes of the fumes for the last couple games. 4 of 18 from him in the final game, and it was actually even grislier than that. They had Bradley, who had been this huge impact for them all ever since he came back in January, who lost his confidence on both ends to the point that I had people tweeting me, "You're such a homer. I can't believe you thought Avery Bradley was good." And it's like, I don't know what to tell you. This guy was a monster defensively for 3 months and has just totally lost his mind. And then in the fourth quarter, he magically turned into Avery Bradley again. But it is amazing that they came within, if Pierce doesn't front rim that 3 and throw the ball right to Shumpert on those 2 plays, the Celtics really might have won that game. The Knicks were folding. And
it was 75-49 at one point.
Yes. And Avery Bradley's layup cut it to 4. Carmelo, I was watching it. We were doing a show that night, and Jalen and Magic were going nuts because Felton got so psyched out by Bradley. He was running away from the ball. And they're inbounding the ball, and he's just, hey guys, I'm going to be over here. You guys handle the dribbling up thing. And they were like, oh my, cause this is somebody that had played with so much confidence for them the first 5 games, and Bradley in 6 minutes took him out. But anyway, you're right. You came out of that series thinking, man, I went from thinking the Knicks would have a real chance to scare Miami to, oh yeah, it's not going to happen. I still thought they were going to easily handle this Indiana team, and now it's pretty clear this is going 6 or 7. I want to switch to Memphis Clippers. So this sounds weird, but I felt like that was a good loss for Memphis. And normally you'd think like, wow, they blew game 1. You can't blow a game like that. Blah blah blah. Every matchup works for them in that series. Durant would have to have 3 more games like that, maybe even a little bit better, I think, for Oklahoma City to win that series. And on top of that, the Kevin Martin 25 points, which, they got 60 combined from those 2 guys. Did you watch? Did you watch that game yet, or you haven't?
I did. I watched it this morning.
Okay. So when you watched that game, were you thinking, wow, Oklahoma City dodged a bullet here. Now this series is in their control, or this is Memphis's series. They just didn't win that game.
Closer to the latter. I watched it and I thought they lost this game, but I think that they found some things that work for them. They know how to play this team. They know how they're going to defend the Thunder without Westbrook. And they played the kind of game they want. And we know Memphis, I mean, there are a lot of teams who would say, oh man, we blew it. We blew a chance to steal game 1. Memphis, their mentality is, okay, we lost. We know that we can grind with this team. We played our kind of game. We don't care that we're on the road. We think we can get the next one. And I think, again, they found some things they can probably clean up, but it was the least surprising game 1 of any game 1, I think, of the playoffs so far. It unfolded almost exactly the way everyone expected, with the exception of Austin Daye suddenly getting back in the rotation for Memphis. But it was as we expected, and I think that Memphis is probably still a slight favorite.
And if you're Oklahoma City, you had a really good Durant game. You had a great Kevin Martin game. Basically, your team played very, very well, except for Ibaka, who just didn't make a shot. But if you're Memphis, nobody really played that well. You didn't have one guy who you could point to and go, Pondexter made a couple threes, but Conley didn't have a great game. Tony Allen wasn't shooting well. Nobody really was awesome. And yet
Tony Allen wasn't shooting well. Rinse, repeat.
Right.
He won't shoot well. But Conley, you bring up Conley. Conley, I think, is exactly the guy I'm talking about when I say I think they found some things that work. He proved in that game, I can get in the lane against these big guys. He had Serge Ibaka and Perkins off balance on the pick and roll. He was getting in the paint. He had that one late turnover with like 35 seconds left, the one that Durant scored off of when they didn't call a timeout, which was very smart. And he was right in the lane, and you thought, oh, he's going to score. And so that's a guy that I look at it as, yeah, I'm with you, that they found he's probably confident that he can do a lot better and get in the paint and create problems for the Thunder.
And if I'm a Memphis fan, the way it's weird, the starter backup thing. And some guys just like to start. It's like an ego thing. But I look at this series, and I said this at halftime of the game yesterday. Tony Allen should be out there every time Kevin Martin's out there. Like, you just use Tony Allen, and they probably only overlapped for like 5 or 6 minutes in that game yesterday. But they should be using Tony Allen the same way in hockey, where you use that one defenseman or that one third line center who just shadows the best scorer on the other team, basically. If you take Kevin Martin out of this series and you just unleash Tony Allen on him, which is exactly what they did to Jamal Crawford in the Clippers series. They took Jamal Crawford out of the series. And if they do that with Kevin Martin, I don't think Oklahoma City can score enough points. Like, I really think Memphis is going to win this in 6. This is the only series that I feel I'll rephrase. This is a series I feel the most confident about. I just think they're better. I think the matchups are great for them. And if they blew this series, it would mean that philosophically they screwed it up.
I think we will see more Tony Allen on Kevin Martin. He's a little too quick for Pondexter, and Jared Bayless shouldn't be allowed within like 10 feet of any of the good Thunder players on defense.
No.
And I think, look, TA only played 21 minutes. And again, it's the Thunder are a much better defensive team than the Clippers, a smarter defensive team than the Clippers, and they were a little bit more aggressive, even more so than the Clippers, I think, in just playing off of Tony Allen, even when he was in the strong side corner, just leaving him to deny simple post-entry passes. Cephalosha was wreaking havoc that way. And I think that sort of freaks Lionel Hollins out some games, and it should. I mean, Tony Allen can be a problem for your offense if he's on the floor. But yeah, I mean, he would eat Kevin Martin for lunch.
That'd be it. He's out of the series if you put Tony Allen on him. And I thought that was what he did to Crawford, in that by the end of that Clipper series, Crawford wasn't even Crawford anymore. And Vinny was that Friday night game. Wow. Playing 12 guys in a deciding playoff game, I thought was one for the ages. I actually thought Vinny was going to get fired today, and that hasn't happened yet. But, when you look at do you feel like I feel like that Clipper team underachieved. Is that a fair statement, or do you disagree?
I mean, it just, the big killer for them, and it would have been the big killer for Memphis, and this is ironic given that Golden State won this series, but getting stuck in that 4-5 series in a loaded Western Conference was just brutal. And some team was going to come out looking like they had underachieved, and it's the Clippers, and they won 17 in a row, and they look like world beaters and all of this. But, given that Blake Griffin suffered a fairly serious ankle injury in advance of the two most important games of the series, and, look, they never swung for the fences. They never tried to they tried, but they never could seal a deal for the second reliable big man. Doesn't have to be a star, but a guy that can just play both ends of the floor decently. They couldn't find that guy. And of course, they don't have any kind of offensive system, really. And those things were both exposed by a really, really good defense. I don't know. Did they underachieve? I don't know. I don't know if that's fair, but they will probably almost certainly have a new coach very soon.
I would have used the entire regular season to figure out if DeAndre Jordan could play 30 minutes a game at center, because that was the only way this team was doing anything. They weren't doing anything with Lamar Odom playing crunch time. They weren't doing anything with Blake Griffin as their small ball center. It had to be Jordan, or you had to trade for somebody who could protect the rim. And as somebody who went to a lot of Clipper games over the last 2 years, I think Jordan it could be a pretty good player. The more he plays and the more he's involved, the better he is. He's not somebody that you can yank around. And he's also somebody that Blake, because they're buddies, feeds off of. And, there's so many things I didn't agree with. Like, I just don't think Chauncey Billups should be playing in the playoffs at this point in his career. God bless him. 2004 Finals MVP, great career. He's not an NBA rotation guy anymore in a good team. If you're playing
that's what made the last game especially puzzling, is that, we have a lot of evidence now that the Clippers are really good when Crawford and Barnes and Bledsoe are all on the floor. Two of them are on the floor, whatever. Yep. And the Billups-Butler combination needed a quicker hook, and you don't hook those guys in favor of Willie Green and Grant Hill. And God bless Grant Hill, he played very well in that game in short stretches, but you need to get the havoc wreakers on the court. And that's sort of like, if you don't have an offensive system beyond running Chris Paul pick and rolls and Blake Griffin post-ups, which are out of the game plan because of his injury, your backup offensive system is just put these crazy dudes on the court, let them fly around on and off the ball and see what happens. And you can't have Willie Green playing and Jamal Crawford not playing. It just can't happen. And you know me, I don't even like Jamal Crawford all that much as a player. He's one of the worst defenders in the league. You can't play Willie Green over him in an elimination game.
And the other thing with Jamal Crawford is you want to spot him in situations where he doesn't have to guard anybody on the other end. It was just so much I disagreed with. You look at how Doc coached those last couple games in the Celtics series. He basically went 7 guys, and he was like, I'm going down. If I'm going down, I'm going down with these 7 guys that I trust. And, the big misnomer about the NBA is that you have to play 10 or 11 guys. Like, you just don't, especially if it's a do or die game. And to not even know who your 7 guys are, the Clippers lost 4 straight. Like, they basically got swept. They won the first 2 games, then they got swept, which when you have Chris Paul, who is one of the 7 best players in the league, it's inexcusable. You got to do better than that. And I think in a weird way, the worst thing that happened to this team was winning that game 7 last year in Memphis. Because if they lost that game, they would have had a new coach. And that game set up this whole season. And this is a team going to the games. It never made sense who was playing and who wasn't playing and what the identity was, why they didn't have an offense. Is that the worst of all the playoff teams? Was that the worst offense, like just in terms of a philosophy that you've seen?
Was it the worst of all the playoff teams? Let me look at the playoff teams. I mean, I think.
But if you just go down the list, like Houston had a philosophy.
Frankly, Oklahoma City is in that conversation, and we've seen without Westbrook that their philosophy. I mean, we knew their philosophy was we have essentially 4 plays that we run. They're all supposed to result in Durant or Westbrook having the ball or catching the ball in a favorable matchup, and just sort of going from there. And there is no system. There is no, constant motion or anything like that. It's just those guys catch the ball and they go, and you take out one of them, and all of a sudden the system is broken and totally reliant on Kevin Durant just being amazing, and he is amazing. But they're in the conversation, sort of, philosophically. I think, and look, Boston for a long time has been too reliant on mid-range jumpers, and they would tell you that that's just because of the personnel that they have, particularly at the big positions, and there's something to that. But I think they have to look very hard in the offseason at scrapping a lot of what they do on offense and finding something new that generates better shots. But those are the teams that I would look at and say, I just don't like watching them play. Even Chicago, with the limited talent they have, they don't score a lot. They're not efficient. But they have a system where the ball moves and bodies move, and there are like 4 or 5 counters built into every set. And it's simple, and everyone knows that it's coming, and everyone knows what they're going to do. But they still produce at least good shots a lot of the time out of it, even though their players are not that great at scoring. Yeah. They still make the defense work a little bit.
And that's another thing I liked about what Memphis did yesterday. I thought they got good shots. They just weren't really going in, but the shots were good. And, the Thunder, they just have to work so hard at getting good shots. And then Fisher made a couple big threes for them. But the way they're relying on Durant, which he might be able to pull it off. I mean, we're now looking at like a LeBron 2009, some of the early Michael Jordan years, like that kind of offensive responsibility that he has. We had a stat yesterday about guys that have averaged 31 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists in the postseason. And right now it's just Durant, it's LeBron in 2009, and Michael Jordan in 1991. That's it. There's only 3 guys that have done that in the last 50 playoffs. So you're asking a lot from them. The other problem for Oklahoma City is, they have to kind of go bigger against this Memphis team, which means more Kendrick Perkins, who's the bane of every advanced metric that you could create. So that'll be interesting. Any chance for Golden State in this series against San Antonio or no?
I don't see a lot of hope for Golden State. I mean, and I'm writing about this for tomorrow. I mean, the interesting question it presents now is that the Spurs have, over the last 2 years, sort of recommitted themselves to playing 2 pretty traditional big guys at all times, with Splitter and Duncan, or Diaw and Duncan, and Splitter will start when he's healthy again. And the Warriors, improvising in the wake of Lee's injury, have put Barnes at power forward and gone full in on small ball, at least to some degree. I mean, Landry started the game 6 against Denver, I think. Yeah. But, that will be interesting to see how Pop responds if Golden State goes that route again. And Pop sort of workshopped. The Lakers series, sadly, was basically like a workshop for Pop. He workshopped like being more polite to the sideline interviewers. Let's see how that goes over. And then he workshopped like in the last couple of games, he played Kawhi Leonard a lot at power forward. And I think thinking this is something we didn't do a lot of in the regular season. Let's just sort of roll it out in these games in which a team has absolutely zero chance to beat us and see how it goes.
Here's the case for Golden State. The small ball thing. I really liked how Harrison Barnes. I think he found his identity as a small ball 4. I don't know if with David Lee is obviously in the way of that, but I just thought it made him more active. It kind of forced him to do stuff, And sometimes there are guys like that who have all the talent in the world, but you basically have to force them to do stuff. And it seems like the small ball has, but that would be the small ball thing. I think is an advantage potentially. And then Stephen Curry just has to be the best guy in the series. And if those 2 things can happen, and then they get that Oakland crowd for those 3 games, they'd have to win in 6. So they'd have to steal 1 or 2. The crowd would have to be off the charts amazing, and they need a little injury luck. They need like an ankle tweak or a little slightly pulled hammy or just anything from the three best Spurs.
Yeah, I don't think the Spurs really give a crap about the crowd, although it helps. But if there's a team that's going to be poised enough in the face of it, it's them. And, Barnes benefited from like unbelievably wide open looks because Denver was a bad defensive team scrambling around against a good shooting team, and they failed. They were bad defending the three all year, and they were bad against Curry. They were bad against Barnes in ways that San Antonio, although they won't trap and do crazy stuff to Curry like the Warriors did, they'll just be cleaner, and they're going to make the Warriors earn those looks through solid execution and not through making boneheaded mistakes or gambling or just, misreading things. And I just think a lot of those open looks are going to be contested or vanish in the series, fair. And that the Spurs are should be, I think, considered pretty heavy favorites.
The one thing I'll say about the crowd, I don't think the crowd, I don't think that Oakland crowd necessarily affects the other team. I think it's the way they affect their own team that becomes beneficial. I think especially younger guys can feed off a crowd like that. I actually, in 2002, when the Celtics made their run, I thought the crowd really helped. And part of the reason the crowd really helped was Pierce and Antoine just fed off the energy. And it seems like that's happening with Curry in these playoff home games. He's feeding off the people, and for good or bad, because you saw it in the last 5 minutes when they really started to collapse against Denver and the crowd got nervous, and there was a really, really nervous, scary energy in that building. And I thought that affected the Warriors too. So it could go either way. But, the great thing is that it's just fun to have Curry in the playoffs for another round. And then you flip over to the other side, Miami would have swept Brooklyn. Brooklyn is just heartless. Like, really, they should just all be embarrassed. And then you have the Bulls who will just fight and scrap and claw, and they're going to do everything they possibly can to stay in this series. They're so well coached. Noah plays with so much heart. He's got to be the MVP of the playoffs, him and Curry so far. We don't think the Bulls could beat Miami, but you would agree Miami was bummed out by the result of that Game 7 in Brooklyn.
Yeah, there's no question that. Look, I haven't talked to anyone in any depth with the Heat, but anyone with common sense would look at those teams and say, we're going to beat either one of them, but Chicago is going to be a huge pain in the ass, and they're going to make our wing scorers work hard, and they're going to take away corner threes because nobody does that better than a Tibbs team. And they're going to be physical, and they're going to play two big guys and force Shane Battier to like body up Carlos Boozer and just like that shit. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
That shit just takes its toll, and Miami will want to get out of there as quickly as possible and just put that series behind them. But I've said all along, look, if Miami is going to win the conference, and if they don't, it's a giant shock. But if they have to go through Chicago and Indiana, they're at least going to have to earn it against sound defensive teams who are going to beat them up a little bit for whoever comes out of the West. And if you have to go through Chicago, Indiana, Memphis, my God, I hope they take a vacation after that and just sit on the beach for a while.
It's the difference between Brooklyn and Chicago for Miami is that they would have beaten either team, but Chicago is they'll leave that Chicago series with a big bruise, right? And be like, oh, what happened? I played Chicago. That's why I'm all purple on the left side of my body. And that's what happens with Chicago. They're going to hit them. They're going to pound them. They're going to fight. They're going to claw. They're not going to be afraid. And you're not going to be able to mail in quarters and halves or games. They also have confidence, I think, from the fact that they ended the streak, I thought was important. But, and
they're going to make you hit tough shots. Like teams like the Nets or, you can get against mediocre defenses that don't have sort of clear-cut rules and great defenders and people who understand where they're supposed to be all the time and good coaching. You're going to get easy buckets. The Pacers and the Bulls do not make mistakes or do not make them very often. You're going to have to hit those like floaters over Hibbert if it comes to Indiana, or you're going to have to like hit those contested jump shots against the Bulls. They're just not going to give you rim runs or open corner threes and all that, or you're going to have to really swing the ball to get those shots. Yeah, you got to earn it. You got to work against them.
And Tibbs, that Brooklyn series was his opus. Hey, he's really one of the great coaching performances we've ever seen for one specific round in the playoffs. People forget, like, they won Game 7, but they really almost won Game 6 too. If Nate had made that layup with like a minute left, I think they would have won that game. And that was a game they had nobody, and Nate was hurt. But it was just such an example of how coaching and character and heart and just everything is a much bigger part of the equation than I think we give it credit for.
And what's great about it is it's not a great coaching performance in a vacuum. It's a great coaching performance because Tibbs, since he walked in the door, has built that defensive structure, gotten everyone to buy in, gotten everyone to follow the rules to a T every single time over 82 games or 66 games over these seasons. And so it pays off when you get into series and half your team is hurt. You throw the guys in there that you have, and you know they are going to execute correctly what we do every single time. And that's enough for us to hang around. So it's really not even a tribute to any like X's and O's stuff he did in the series. It's
Right.
just the years of drudgery and groundwork it takes to put that system in place. Look, if he didn't play his guys to death in the regular season, he'd be in the conversation with Pop for best coach in the league.
And also, like, when he pulls the Marcus Teague card in Game 7, and who was the other guy he played in Game 7 who had barely played in the series?
Daquan Cook.
Yeah, Daquan Cook, and like even those guys play well. It's people always say this with the great coaches. It's not just how they coach the best three guys, but the last three guys. And when you can pull out like even a half decent Daquan, like they had to scrape the dust off Daquan Cook, and he ended up making a big shot. And then you look at what he's done with Nate and Bellinelli, who, I don't think were ever considered even mediocre defensive players. And you could fit those guys in your system and not have your defense collapse with Nate Robinson and Marco Bellinelli. I mean, come on.
Marco's a tough dude. Monty Williams will rave to you about how tough Marco Bellinelli is. And I remember talking to him early in the season in Brooklyn, and he was like very candid. He's like, I'm struggling to learn the rules of the system. It's really hard. It's really different than how I've played in previous stops before, but I really think I'm going to get it. And by the end of the season, you slot him in there, and he's where he's supposed to be. And he's running, pick and rolls that aren't spectacular, but he's making the right pass at the right time. And, when push comes to shove, you can always hide one of those guys on Gerald Wallace, which is what they did all series. Hey, Nate, you can't guard anyone. You can't guard Darren. You can't guard Joe Johnson. Just like hang around by Gerald Wallace, even though you're a foot shorter than he is, because we're so unafraid of him that we can just stash you over there.
Yeah, was he the all-time hider, offensive, or the hideree? I guess
he's the hider. See, I misnamed it. I would name him the hider, but he should be the hidey, and Nate should be the hider. But this is a semantic issue. He made him pay a little bit, though. What did he have? 19 in Game 7, and he had a couple of big threes in the 2 games before that. But yeah, I mean, they just didn't guard him at all, and they didn't care who was guarding him. And if you and I had to suit up for them in Game 7, which was not far from reality, we would have been guarding Gerald Wallace.
What happened with that Gerald Wallace trade could really be like a 30 for 30 short. Just everything about it.
I don't think you're getting any comment from Billy King.
Well, probably not. But to do top 3 protection when Portland, Gerald Wallace was a free agent. Portland was going in the crapper. They had like no chance to make the playoffs. They probably would have just accepted a top 15 protected first round pick, I'm guessing. Right?
Yeah, I think
to get rid of him?
I think they and the league were surprised by what they got for Wallace. For sure.
I would use a different word than surprised. I would use flabbergasted. And then to have your rationale be we only like 3 players in the draft when you're making this decision in early March before you've had combines or the tournament or anything. I mean, that's egregious. That was fireable. And they gave him an extension. And then they gave Gerald Wallace the $40 million extension. The whole thing was incredible. I really thought that was the perfect storm of bad GM-ness. And you look at their team next year and it's $90 million. It was same team, bringing everybody back $90 million. You haven't even paid Andre Blatch yet.
Oh yeah, and he's he's talking about how people should be lining up to woo him now. Look, I think Billy is a smart guy who was in a bad situation, and the bad situation was you have a crazy owner who demands that you be very good immediately, and you have a franchise player whom, whether he's a franchise player in reality or not, he certainly played like it the last 25, 30 games this season, you need to keep, and he's sort of a finicky, cranky person, and you needed to show him all these things. I think there was some pressure there, and pressure like that produces decisions that are short-sighted. That was a short-sighted decision. what actually the most annoying and the part that annoyed me more than any of it was coming out and saying there are only 3 guys in this draft. You just
so
can't.
bad.
You can't say that. It's just partly because it's so transparently justifying a trade that everyone will sniff out right away as a shaky trade. That it's just the transparency and sort of the arrogance of that statement really bugged me. And it still does, because it was just clearly not true. They didn't know there were only 3 players. It was just something they obviously had to say in order to sell this deal to fans who wouldn't know any better.
And I'm guessing Portland just must have been in disbelief the entire time. Like, really? They must have been like, as it got closer to being called in, like, yeah, no, nothing's changed. It looks like we're really going to get a top 3 protected lottery pick for a guy who's leaving. But you're being much more diplomatic than I am. And also, like, I know Darren Williams played like a franchise player down the stretch, but can't be slept on the fact that he was driving the cruise ship when they lost a 16-point lead at home with 3.5 minutes to go. Oh no, not at home. Was that in Chicago? Game 4 was in Chicago. Yeah. Up 16 with about 3:15 left, or up 14. CJ Watson missed the dunk. So up 14, 3+ minutes left. And then the Game 7 stink bomb when they had 3 of the 4 best players in that game. They had Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, and Brook Lopez, and then you had Joakim Noah on the other end. And somehow you're down the entire game by double figures. I thought that was wretched.
It was a bad outcome to their first season. It will be interesting to see who they hire as their new coach, since they waited about 30 minutes to fire PJ Carlesimo. And what, if anything, they can get for Humphries, who they will peddle furiously once trade season starts up.
They're going to have to
they may have to do a 3-team deal. They are going to try and find somebody's overpaid but still pretty good guy.
Right.
And I think the guy they just faced, Boozer, is not a bad candidate for that slot. Those talks will happen.
Boozer is a great candidate. There's a couple others, but you're right. They will have to take somebody who is talented but overpaid, and that's what you get. I have a prediction. I'm going on the record. I'm going to hit this one. Phil Jackson will be your next Brooklyn Nets coach, and he will get 4 years for, I'm going to say, $53 million. That's my prediction. I have no inside information. Just that's my prediction.
I don't even have a reaction to that.
Phil Jackson, Brooklyn Nets, 4 years, $53 million with some sort of bonus. If they make the finals, it goes to 60, something like that. Biggest deal ever for a coach by far.
Money is obviously no object.
Yeah.
He'll spend whatever.
And I also think Phil Jackson would want to end his career in New York. That's another part. I think he wants to coach again. He wanted to coach last year. He wanted to coach the Knicks, and Jim Dolan didn't want to hire him. So I just think that's the match. I think Prokhorov thinks big picture, big names all the time. And all you have to do is say, hey, here's this guy. He won 11 titles. We can get this guy. And he wants this. And Prokhorov will say, okay, cut him the check.
What's the over-under on number of games until D. Will drops the snide remark about the triangle offense? Like 25 games?
Oh, no, that'd be preseason. It'll be the eighth preseason game would be when that happens. Wait, we had one more thing to discuss really quickly. Last thing, 1 minute take. What do the Celtics do with Pearson Garnett?
I think they'll try to trade both of them, maybe in a package, probably revisiting some of the Clippers talks that have been reported and definitely happened. They'll look at all their options, and I think that they will try, as they have before with Pierce, to make trades that bring in a young player, 2 young players, a draft pick, something. And their sort of reluctance in the past has been, well, we can't take a step back, because we're a competitive team and we want to remain competitive, and we haven't found a Pierce deal or an Allen deal or whatever that keeps us competitive. But I think that they understand now, and probably have for a while, that there is no being competitive right now. They're not a contender. They're not close to a contender. So if you take a step back, it's not a big deal. So I think they'll try and trade both of them. They seem confident. I don't know that KG is going to come back and, perhaps waive no trade agreement and all that. So we'll see. But look, it's always the safest bet that they come back to Boston just because of what they make and their value and the desire to bring back something that will make the fans happy. But if there's a time where that incentive is out the window, I think it's now.
Stephen A. Smith said on First Take, he brought up some blockbuster day that is just ridiculous and won't happen. But I think some variation of it could be interesting. He said Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Doc Rivers to the Clippers for Blake Griffin, Bledsoe, Jordan, and Butler. Now, the Griffin part's ludicrous. Blake Griffin is not getting traded. Donald Sterling loves Blake Griffin. But could you see a possible trade of Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Bledsoe, DeAndre Jordan, Caron Butler? Doc Rivers is in there. The Clippers pay the Celtics to take Doc Rivers' contract. That Doc Rivers part seems far-fetched, but the actual framework of those 5 players would work within a trade.
Can you trade coaches? I mean, I know the Celtics and the Clippers when they were the Braves, traded owners. So maybe should the owners traded franchises? So maybe you can trade coaches. I don't know.
Well, Doc would have to agree.
Yeah, does Doc have a no trade clause in his contract? How does this even work?
I don't know. It's definitely one of the craziest things that's been on the internet in a while. But I do think, from what I've been told, KG and Paul, they're just tight, and their families are tight, and just I don't think KG would stay in Boston without Paul. I don't think he would retire and leave Paul in Boston. And if one of them went somewhere, I think he'd want the other to come.
Well, I think if the Clippers have learned anything, but it's not that they've learned anything, but Chris Paul is 28, 27. He's about to sign a max deal. He has knee issues. He is not going to be able to, you can't say for the next 5 years, he's our undisputed, all the time, carrying the entire offense guy. You just can't. It's too late to do that now. And so they need to bring in more support for him. And but more than that, their window is now. And I'm not sure if that window is, with Paul Griffin, is open 4 years from now. It might just be the next 2 or 3 seasons. And so, I think you go for it. If you have a chance to go for it in a way that you don't think hurts your team irreparably, and if you don't think losing Jordan does that, then you do it.
That should have been the mindset in February.
I think it was. I think they talked about it for sure.
But it didn't happen, though. If they had any chance to get KG, they should have closed the deal, because they had a real chance to win the title this year if he was on that team. I think they could have, he was exactly what they didn't have. And he was exactly the reason why they didn't win, other than the coaching. I mean, maybe the coach would have screwed it up anyway, but if you can somehow salvage that, you bring Garnett and Pierce in, you figure out the other good part about that trade is it breaks up Blake and DeAndre, and the Blake and DeAndre versus Chris Paul thing, as I wrote about Friday, is a real thing. And that's I don't
get how DeAndre has the stature to be a real thing in some sort of feud that has any kind of impact anywhere. I mean, look, DeAndre Jordan's a nice player. His development this season, I think, was a little bit of a disappointment. I just don't if you're making a decision as a franchise, I just don't think, it's going to make DeAndre unhappy, even if it's just by extension of Blake.
Can I explain it to you?
I don't get why DeAndre Jordan factors into this at all.
Can I explain it to you?
Yes, they're friends. I know they're friends, right? He and Blake are tight.
You have 2 people that aren't happy with somebody. Now they can talk about it with each other. So let's say you and Rembert are mad at me. Let's say you're mad at me independently, but you have nobody to talk about it with, and everybody else is happy with me. Then you're thinking, wow, am I an a-hole? Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm in my own head. But now you have Rembert, and you're out for drinks with Rembert, and Rembert's like, God, Simmons, what a jerk. Can you believe he blah, blah, blah? And you're like, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And now you guys are talking about what a jerk I am. That's how it goes. And that's when if you have the second person to complain about whatever's bothering you with, then it takes a life of its own. It starts to fester. And I think
it bothers them that CP dragged their asses to 57 wins and national TV and elite status. And, what are they with Eric Gordon? A 48-win 6 seed. They get smoked in the first round. I'm not saying it makes
sense. I think he's really rough. I think his leadership style is, very demanding. And he judges people by, are we winning? Are we doing well? Are you guys doing this? Are you guys doing that? And they're young guys. And on top of it, like, they gave Chris a lot of power last summer with free agent moves. Blake is allegedly the franchise guy. They didn't ask him for his opinion on that stuff. Blake has commercials. Chris has commercials. It's kind of the alpha dog thing that we always thought would happen with Wade and LeBron. But I think it's happened here. And the reality is you put the right coach in and it's squashed in 5 seconds.
I got news for Blake Griffin, and I'm a big Blake Griffin fan. I think it's a joke that some people still don't think he has a post game. I think he might be, he and Marc Gasol, maybe the two best passing big men in the league. I think he's a wonderful all-around player. I got news for him. Chris Paul is the alpha dog, period. Like, That guy's on a different level. Sorry.
Well, who gets introduced last at the Clipper games?
I'm guessing Blake. I don't know. I haven't been to a Clipper game this year.
Blake. It's little stuff like that.
That's nice. That's nice for him. I hope he enjoys that. He's not the alpha dog.
It's little stuff like that. And the right coach and the right team and all that stuff can figure it out. But what happened with the Clippers this year is they splintered into their little camps. And it was fine when they were winning, but as soon as things started going south, you saw what happened.
I want to be in whatever camp has Matt Barnes in it, because I want the craziest guy on the team to be in my camp. I want the guy most prone to violence to be in my camp.
Yeah. It was when that game 6 started degenerating, you could have given me any scenario with Matt Barnes and I would have believed it. You'd have been like, this game is going to end with Matt Barnes throwing somebody through the scorer's table. Like it's like a Spanish announcer's table at a WWE pay-per-view. I'd have been like, absolutely, that's going to happen.
And he was in the middle of everything and somehow didn't get ejected. Like every time something happened, it was like Matt Barnes was mouthing off or waving his arms. Like somehow he wasn't one of the guys who got ejected.
Him just brooding. Hey, we have to go because we're calling Haralabos, your old buddy.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what he says.
Yeah, it'll be good. Zach Lowe, we will look forward to your Tuesday monster of a column that I always enjoy reading. See you on Grantland. Thanks for the time, as always.
Thank you, sir.
All right, before we call Bob Voulgaris, first a word from our friends at Subway.
Hurry to Subway restaurants for the Smokehouse Barbecue Chicken. Tender pulled chicken topped with a smoky, sweet barbecue sauce on your favorite freshly baked bread. Try it as a $6 foot-long special or 6-inch fresh fit sub for a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
All right, as promised, we're bringing the world's greatest basketball gambler. I don't know if that's actually true, but I'm giving him that title. I think it's a good title. I think it's a good moniker for him. Bob Voulgaris, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Bill?
So you were calling this Indiana Knicks series on Twitter yesterday, which I missed because I was taping television, and you were saying that the odds, which I think were like for the series, were something like Indiana was plus 185 or something. And you were saying,
I think at the time I tweeted it, I think you could have got like around plus 180.
And you thought it was a dead even series. You actually gave a slight advantage to Indiana.
I think Indiana matches up pretty well with the Knicks. So I thought I'm not really, you called me the world's greatest NBA gambler. I'm not really gambling as much as I used to in terms of the playoffs, etc. So I'm just been giving up some stuff on Twitter just to help people out every now and then, just to kind of make it a little more interesting. Gives me a little more of a sweat if I can. I want to win the game. So yeah, I gave that one out. I think the series is pretty evenly matched. I think Indiana matches up really, really well. They've got a great defender in Paul George to defend Carmelo. Their scheme is probably the best defensive scheme of any team that's in the NBA, even better than the Bulls and Thibodeau. So that's mainly the reason why I like Indiana.
So what you're doing on Twitter was almost like gambling philanthropy.
It's not gambling. It's more I really hate bookmakers. So I just like to punish bookmakers. So if I'm not betting, I figure the least I can do is punish them in other ways.
So like the really good gamblers, they look for opportunity in terms of the public perception versus what the actual perception is. And in this case,
that's part of it for sure. Yeah, definitely.
So you have the Knicks, a public team by all accounts, a team that is always a little bit overrated no matter how they're doing, as long as they're doing half decently. And Indiana, a team that not a lot of people know about, didn't finish the year that great. They didn't really light the Hawks series on fire by any imagination.
I didn't even watch any of the Hawks game. That's how under the radar they are. Were those games even? They were like on NBA TV Nobody watched any of those games. I forgot that they were even playing a series when they played the Hawks.
I don't even know if they were on NBA TV. It might have been whatever their sister channel of NBA TV is. It was on that. It might have been on WNBA TV. But really, I'm so mad I didn't see it. And as soon as I hadn't seen your tweets, and then I saw a couple tweets after when the Pacers were up, and I was like, oh, how did I not see that? Because I was just looking at it from the sense of the Pacers bench is terrible.
Their bench is terrible, to be fair. I mean,
and
if they ever get in a situation where they're in foul trouble for whatever reason, I don't know why that would happen other than because they play really good defense. They're in a lot of trouble. I mean, they tried putting Hansborough on Carmelo at one point, and it was a disaster.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they are very, very – I mean, their bench is non-existent, basically.
I was thinking no bench, no home court, and then I just figured the Knicks would get ridiculous calls because the league wants nothing more than New York versus Miami in the Eastern Finals, and I thought maybe the calls would swing that way. But after watching that game, especially with what Hibbert was doing in the really the second half, I mean a little in the first half, but he just took over the game defensively in the second half.
Yeah, it was amazing. Their entire scheme is brilliant, really. I mean, they play like the perfect – they're like the Houston Rockets offensive idea of never, ever taking a mid. They're like on defense, they do the exact opposite. They don't ever want you taking the three-point shot, and they don't ever want you getting a good shot in the paint. And that's easy to say. It's hard to do, but they've got the right personnel for it. They kind of funnel everything towards Hibbert, but not in a way where he's like over-helping and leaving his man so that, the Knicks can just easily do like an alley-oop to Tyson Chandler or whoever. I mean, they just do like he recovers really well.
Yeah.
They're a fun team. Their defensive statistics, if you look, I think they put it up on ESPN yesterday or ABC, whatever channel it was on. They were like number one in like almost every category on defense for the season,
right,
which is remarkable.
Well, then you look at the Memphis. Zach and I had Zach on the podcast before you, and we were talking about how, as weird as this sounds, that was a good loss for Memphis. It wasn't a loss where you're like, oh my God, we squandered our chance to steal a game one. It's like, they don't have to worry about stealing games. I think they have a better team, and the matchups are in their favor. When you watch that game, Memphis was basically, I think, they might have even been favored in the series slightly.
Yeah, it was a pure pick'em.
Right.
Which is amazing because Oklahoma City's got home court. So, essentially they're saying that. By the way, I kind of disagree with that whole, everyone's really on the Memphis bandwagon.
Let's hear it. Let's hear a disagreement. I need a disagreement.
I just think, and I thought this before the game, I mean, I do think that Memphis has, it's going to be a close series, but I think pick'em is an absurd price. Oklahoma City's got the best player by far. Really, Memphis's advantage against teams is they just have they're really big and they play tough. But one of Oklahoma City's weaknesses is going to their big lineup when more than they should. That's like one of the weaknesses they've always kind of historically had, is playing Perkins too much and playing Ibaka too much and Perkins together. And in this series, they can get away with that. That's what they should be doing. Westbrook is obviously extremely valuable to them. He's played pretty amazing the All-Star break, and it's a big loss for them. Durant is just too good. I don't know that Memphis can corral Durant in a 7-game series and win. I mean, I know Houston made it look like they really made Oklahoma City look bad, but that happens a lot in the first round. I don't even remember the year the Celtics won. I'm sure you do, but they went 7 against Atlanta in that year.
Right.
And so I don't know. I look at the series and I look at Oklahoma City basically has nothing other than Durant. I mean, they're playing Derek Fisher all these minutes. They're playing Reggie Jackson. They're playing, but they do have guys who can defend Memphis. And Memphis's offense sucks. I mean, their basic offense is going to be like a Marc Gasol face-up jumper or a Marc Gasol turnaround jumper, and then Zach Randolph. Now, if there's anything that Oklahoma City can defend, it's those two things. So I do see it being like a really hard-fought, close series, but I just think that Oklahoma City, in the end, will prevail and will end up winning the series. And I think that people did overreact. I thought that the price was a huge overreaction. I thought the right price should have been like around -140, -150. Well, you're not going to like the price now.
Well, you're not going to like the price now. 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 You're not going to like the price now.
Well, now the adjusted series prices, they do what I tend to do, like when I'm doing this stuff, is I don't really bet very many adjusted series prices anymore, because you can get so much more value down just by betting the individual games. So,
do you know what the price is now for the series? You're going to be surprised.
I could find out in 2 seconds. Talk about.
I have it. I'm looking at it.
Oh, what? Okay, what is the adjusted series price?
So you thought it should have been Thunder minus 140 even before the series started.
Correct.
Right now it's Thunder minus 150.
Yeah, that's about right. Based on if you agree that the minus 110 is a good price, that's where you will get values. You'll get value betting on the Thunder in games in Memphis. Maybe one of the two games if you bet them on the money line, because it feels like, based on the first game price, Oklahoma, Memphis is maybe like a 5 or 6 point favorite in their home games.
Well, so Memphis is only a 2.5 point underdog in the second game.
Yeah, they do the flip flop. It started off 3.5, and because they lost, now they'll call the zigzag theory.
So you're almost better off. Yeah, you're almost better off if you think instead of betting that plus 130 for the series, you're almost better off just betting the plus 2.5. And then if for some reason you're wrong about the series, you still have a chance to maybe sneak out the +1 or the +2 potentially.
Yeah, in some cases with the series prices, if you really do feel the one team is dominant and is going to win, you're just better off just betting them in each individual game and profiting that way.
Golden State, San Antonio. San Antonio is like a 7-1 favorite. There's no case to be made for Golden State, is there?
I wouldn't think so. I don't know. It's interesting. They played really, really good against Denver, but they also benefited a lot from a couple of things that happened. They benefited, this is going to sound ridiculous, they kind of benefited from the David Lee injury.
No, I'm with you. I thought Barnes was the small ball 4. I actually liked their team more with him at the 4 than David Lee. I agree.
Yeah, what happened is not even so much that David Lee's a bad. I'm not arguing that he's a bad player, but what it did was it forced George Karl now to adjust, and he historically has not been a pretty good coach at adjusting. So what ended up happening is he just started panicking. He started going small. He didn't play any of his bigs at all, and when that happened, it just turned into a complete shootout. And the one big advantage Denver had against Golden State was Fareed versus Lee. I don't know if you watched the regular season games, but Fareed basically owned David Lee in the regular season.
Yeah,
I mean, it was a disgrace. He was out rebounding him. He was completely owning him both on the offensive and defensive glass, getting putbacks, getting out in the break, doing everything to overpower Golden State in that matchup. And then they kind of got lucky that he went down, and they lucked into, okay, let's go small now and see what happens. And then what ended up happening was it ended up being just a huge advantage for them. So that was kind of fortunate.
I'm glad you brought up the George Karl thing. I wrote about it a little bit in Friday's column. I hate using the word overrated, but I do think it's been amazing over the last, 15 years. There's this perception that he is one of the best coaches in the league. And you always hear his name thrown out, especially by TV guys with like Popovich and all these people. And it's like, first of all, he's only made one finals. Second of all, his team has, with the Nuggets lose 9 out of the last 10 first rounds. He had the 94 collapse. I mean, I think he's a good coach, and you might even be able to call him a very good coach. I actually voted for him, number 2 for coach of the year this year, just for what he did with that really funky, weird Nuggets team. But, he's for me, he's like up there with Rick Adelman, the second tier of coaches. I don't think he should be on that top tier, and I don't understand why people keep putting him up there. So it sounds like you don't feel like he should be in that top tier either.
I think he's a very, very good regular season coach.
Yep.
I think he has a good scheme that works in the regular season. The playoffs are a whole different animal because you're making adjustments. Look what Golden State did. They had something bad happen to them. They made an adjustment, and it worked for them. He's not really the type of coach who has ever really made adjustments in the playoffs. So now to say he's a bad coach, there's bad coaches. He's not a bad coach.
He's no Vinny.
He got out-coached. Didn't make the right adjustments, kind of scrambled a little bit. I mean, to give you an idea of how decent a coach he is, remember the year he had his cancer thing, he went out, and then was it Adrian Dantley, is that the name of the guy who took over?
Right, they immediately fell apart.
Right, and look how bad their team was when that happened. So that'll tell you that he is a good coach. But that being said, you're right, he's not one of the top. There are very few top coaches who you can see in the playoffs they're making adjustments. And for me, those coaches are guys like Thibodeau, Rick Carlisle. I actually would put Adelman in there. I think Adelman's a very, very good coach. Doc Rivers.
Wow. Doc, yeah, I would put Doc.
Is a good coach. Whoever is the architect of this Indiana defense, whether it's Vogel or Brian Shaw or whoever came up with this defensive scheme that they have, is to me like brilliant, because they've just done such a great job. I mean, they have the personnel that helps. They have Paul George, who's probably the best, or one of the best wing defenders in the league, maybe right behind LeBron. And then they have Hibbert, who's a great defender. But that scheme they have is brilliant. So that I would put that person, whether it's Vogel or the other. It's probably Vogel. It could be Shaw. I'm not sure.
Would you put Spoelstra on that list?
I would, yeah. I mean, he has done. I mean, look, he's done a lot this year compared to what happened last year. I mean, we talked about this in our preseason thing that we talked about, just in terms of now they have like the right style of play they can play. They're kind of positionless, and he's in like a no-win situation. He's supposed to win with that team, but guess what? He is winning with that team. If they don't win the title this year, it'll be a huge knock on him. It'll be, barring some injury, it'll be a huge knock on him. But yeah, I do think that they've got the right scheme, and they're definitely utilizing their personnel to the highest level for sure. And then there's just a bunch of coaches who just are not very good, who don't really separate themselves from the rest of the league.
Well, let's talk about one of them, because people thought like I had an axe to grind against Vinny Del Negro or something, and it's like I don't have an axe to grind against anybody. Like I never root for people to lose their jobs. I wasn't even when David Kahn lost his job. I didn't even tweet about it. Like I don't like when people lose their jobs, but it's also my job to comment on how people in sports and especially basketball are doing their job. And if I'm paying money to go to Clipper games and I'm watching them play and they're poorly coached, they're playing the wrong guys and they have no philosophy and the offense is basically just clear out for Chris for the last 6 minutes, like I have to talk about it. And, they got swept by Memphis. They won the first two and then they got swept. And for me, that was the epitome of all the bad coaching that happened with this team over the course of the season, the lack of philosophy, the fact he was yanking guys in and out and really couldn't settle on a rotation and playing Lamar Odom in crunch time and starting Chauncey Billups and all these crazy things. So could you at least give your take on this so people don't think I'm crazy?
I think I started the Vinny Del Negro as a horrible coach thing on Twitter years ago. I've always been the guy, to the point where it became so overreacted, where everyone talked about how terrible he was, that I was kind of like, I felt like now I wanted to be contrarian again. Like, well, he can't possibly be that bad. Because all everyone was talking about was how bad a coach he was.
Yeah.
I think he does some things well where, he got Matt Barnes to play really good this year. And a part of it is Matt Barnes is in a contract year, so he's probably going to play better than he normally would. But there's interviews where Matt Barnes said the reason why he played so well is because, Coach Del Negro gave him the freedom, gave him the confidence, et cetera, et cetera. So he does that okay, I suppose. But they have no offense whatsoever. They don't have a scheme that they run. They don't have like a specific type of offense that they're trying to run. They have the best point guard in basketball. They're not able to really utilize that. And their defense is really ridiculous. I mean, the way they would get carved up by teams over and over and over again because their defense is so basic.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not it was really kind of embarrassing to watch the last game that they played. He was just grasping at straws and they went through a stretch where they played Caron Butler and Grant Hill at the 4 and the 5 versus Memphis, who had Marc Gasol and Zach Randolph.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is like something that if you're playing like a little kid on NBA 2K or whatever game people decide, because I don't know what the popular games are anymore, but if you were playing a little kid, that's something they would do. They would play Grant Hill at the 5 and Caron Butler. It was so ridiculous. I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Yeah.
It obviously didn't work. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of. I don't think you need to apologize for. Look, these guys get paid a lot of money to coach. They're on guaranteed contracts. They get fired, they still get paid. You don't have to feel sorry for a guy who gets fired. There's a lot of people in the world that you feel sorry for. It's not an NBA coach on a guaranteed contract, that's for sure.
Scotty Brooks?
Scotty Brooks is. I was a huge. I really wanted Oklahoma City to win last year. I didn't bet on them at all, but I wanted them to win just because. I even had like Miami bets, but I was still quietly rooting for Oklahoma City. And I thought he did a bad job last year, but he seems to be doing a pretty decent job this year, pushing the right buttons. I mean, we're only through one round and one game, but I think he's kind of learning as he's going along. I mean, I don't think he's a great coach. The thing is, it's like we're comparing these coaches to other great coaches, and then it's almost like comparing someone to LeBron James. I mean, it's easy to see the difference in athletic ability and say, oh, look how great LeBron James is, but it's not that easy to see the intellect and the ability that some of these great coaches have and see the difference. You just assume that everyone should be as good as a Greg Popovich or a Doc Rivers or whoever the other great coaches are, when it's unfair almost to compare someone like Scotty Brooks to a great coach.
That's a fair point.
A great coach.
I thought it was funny the point you made earlier about this series is good for Memphis because they stupidly play Kendrick Perkins so much, but now here's a series where we actually need him, and now that stupidity is being justified. But like playing Kendrick Perkins in the last series was about the dumbest thing you can do.
They went away from it a little bit, though.
They finally did. Yes,
they matched up. That was the one thing where I was like, oh, he's getting it, because they did. You know, I thought that in that series, I was going crazy the first game where, you know, Houston started Ashik, however you pronounce his name, and Greg Smith, and they basically had no win playing those guys whatsoever. I mean, they could not win a game or a minute or a stretch or whatever playing those two guys together on offense. So I was tweeting that fervently. This is ridiculous. What are they doing? Why are they playing these guys? And they quickly made adjustments to not playing. They didn't start them in the second half of some games.
Yep.
And so they made some adjustments. But then Brooks actually made similar adjustments at that time. He actually matched up, and they played a lot of minutes with Durant at the 4. That's the one thing that this injury to Westbrook does a little bit, is it allows them to play Durant at the 4 a little bit more, because they're just grasping, and now they want to play Fisher and Jackson and Mark and Cephalosha, and then they can play Durant at the 4 if they want to. So maybe that helps a little bit. It obviously hurts them a lot, but it might help them, or maybe they were going to do that anyways because they realized how, you know, their folly from last year. But
yeah, because Westbrook is out, now you can't go 4-on-5 with Perkins because you don't have enough scoring.
Yeah,
so in a weird way, their team fell into place a little bit more because Jackson's doing the broke man's Westbrook impersonation, but you can't also then have Perkins out there because now.
Yeah,
you know.
And the one thing it does make you aware of the fact that you've got to get Durant the ball in spots where he can excel, and some of the toughest spots to double are like on the box there, like where LeBron gets the ball. It's really tough to double. That's why you see Fisher getting all these wide open threes, and Mark kind of going off a little bit at times. So it's interesting, but I don't know. I do think that, you know, Memphis has a really good chance of beating him, but I just feel like a line of pickup. If the series was reversed and Memphis had the 4 games at home versus the 3 games on the road, I would think it'd be justified making Memphis a bigger favorite than Oklahoma City would. But because Oklahoma City, I mean, home court advantage is so key in these playoff series. It's really big. It's worth like 8 or 9 points versus a neutral site game. The swing between home and away is like almost 10 points. So
it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Pacers in that respect. And I mentioned this a couple of times, and the Indiana fans get mad at me, but I'm just telling you what I'm watching. When they play big market teams like the Knicks or the Lakers or the Bulls, there's a lot of fans of the other teams in that building. And I think, I don't know if there's any way to measure this, but I think it's a bummer when you're playing a home game and you have 6,000 fans of the other team at your home game.
Yeah,
you know?
It's brutal.
I just think it's a weird energy.
Well, it's not cool.
You've noticed that though, right, with their home games? Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I have. Although I will say that if you watch go back and watch the 2 home games they played versus the Knicks this year, and get back to me and see what happened. I mean, I think they basically blew them out of the building. I don't know what the score. I can't remember the score offhand, but they completely crushed them.
Was that during the Amari era?
I don't even think it was. I think it was during that. It was during the time where Indiana was just beating everybody by like 20 points in the first half. That's what really led me to believe that this team could have been something really special. I was watching that stretch of basketball. It was right before Granger came back.
Yep.
They were playing so good that I thought, this is a team that could beat anybody the way they're playing. I actually thought that they might even be able to beat Miami at one point. The problem is Miami went and got a big who's playing outstanding for them.
Anderson.
And, you know, if they didn't pick up Anderson, I think Indiana would have had a really good chance of beating Miami in the playoffs, just because their size would have been really tough to handle. But
Yeah,
now Miami
Anderson's-
went and got like a big who's basically they're the best big they've had aside from Bosch in the Big Three era. I mean, he's playing awesome. So I think it's going to be tough now for Indiana to beat them, really tough. But I do think they would have been a live dog against them had Miami not picked up Birdman for sure.
Yeah, that's a big 18 minutes a game he's given them. You know, there's
Huge.
only 240 minutes total in a game for 5 guys, and they were about 20 minutes a game short.
Yeah, they were playing
Just in general.
Joel Anthony
Yeah.
2 years ago, and the corpse of Udonis Haslem, and just trying all these different things and playing just Bosch at center. I mean, they were in really, really, really tough. I thought Indiana should have beat them last year. That was the chance they really had to beat them, but they were a little bit young. It was like probably a little bit too much to ask for them. But they're playing a lot better this year. It's just a shame Miami actually got a decent center because there aren't very many decent centers. If you look at all the guys they auditioned to get to the point of Birdman, they went through like Eddie Curry, they went through Dexter Pittman, they went through all these different guys they thought might be the guy, and then the last guy was Birdman, who probably would have been signed a lot earlier if he didn't have all his stuff.
I mean, he's a different type of player, but even Rashard Lewis was somebody I think they were hoping they could get 15 minutes.
Yeah, they were trying to turn all these players who weren't centers into centers, and all these centers who weren't basketball players into basketball players.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're thinking Miami and Indiana and San Antonio and Oklahoma City.
That would definitely be what I would go with for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And there's no chance Miami loses unless there's an injury.
To Chicago or
to anybody? Just to anybody. Yeah.
I would say it'd be really tough without an injury. I think San Antonio or Indiana do have a chance. They're not as big a favorite as everyone thinks they are, but they are a pretty big favorite. I mean, if you really look at, they're a 66-win team with a huge margin. I don't know. I don't see how. I don't see how they could lose, but it's possible, I suppose. I don't know. Anything can happen. It's exciting. We'll see.
Quick question. If you had an NBA ballot, who would you have voted for Coach of the Year?
If I would have had an NBA ballot, I would have voted for Spoelstra.
Who would you have voted for Defensive Player of the Year?
Who won Defensive Player of the Year?
Marc Gasol.
That's not a bad one. I probably would have voted for LeBron James. He
was my number 2 pick.
Yeah.
I should have consulted with you. I went Gasol, then I went LeBron, and then I went Joakim Noah third. The only reason I had Noah third was just because he was hurt. I think he missed.
There's like
games.
The guy who I would have maybe slid in there a little bit would have been Paul George. I'm a huge Paul George super fan.
You love Paul George.
He's a good player.
Yeah.
He's like 23 years old, and he's not LeBron James. I'm not going to go crazy and say he's LeBron James, but he's the closest facsimile of LeBron James that we have in basketball, which doesn't say a lot about him because there's no one else even close to LeBron James. But, by orders of magnitude, if you're to go all the way down, he'd be the closest facsimile we have to LeBron James. He defends, he rebounds, he passes, he gets steals, and he can shoot he can't shoot about as well as LeBron. Nobody in the history of the game shot as well as LeBron shooting right now, but at the age of if you were to compare the two, their games at the age of 23, somewhat similar. Not really, but he's the closest facsimile we have. It's a pretty bad one. It's like maybe like a 240p facsimile, but it's there.
This is a very poor man's.
A very, very poor man's LeBron James.
In my 2010 NBA draft diary, I made fun of Indiana for taking him over Xavier Henry. So, as always,
it shows you how tough it is to pick these players.
Hey, it is, man. But yeah, I mean, he had I think he came off one or two college seasons. They were spotty. There were motivation questions, and just goes to show you, NBA draft, you never never know. All right. So follow you on Twitter at HARA. Finish it because I'm blanking. LABOB.
Yeah.
HARALABOB.
At Twitter, yeah.
And I decided, even though I had you bookmarked and I was just reading you retroactively, I decided after the Indiana thing, I had to refollow you because I was really mad that I missed that. So now
I probably tweeted like 10 times in the last. I've been on vacation. I probably only tweeted like 10 times in the last 30 days, and then I tweeted like 50 times. So right after you followed me, I probably went on a binge yesterday. Completely coincidental, but yeah, I don't completely tweet as madly as I used to.
I'm okay with it because you made me rethink that Indiana thing, and I blame myself. But thank God we have you.
We'll win 4 straight. We'll look like idiots, but we'll see.
Yeah. And the good thing is the New York fans won't rub that into our faces at all.
No, at least I'm free rolling though. I said bet Indiana on the money line, game 1, 2-1, which I did. They won, and then bet them on the series. So I'm kind of free rolling in that sense. But I do think Indiana is a really decent. I mean, it probably won't be as good a bet anymore because now that I've opened up my big mouth. But in general, I think it's a pretty good bet.
All right, I'm calling you before round 3. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
All right, I appreciate it. Yep.
Bye-bye.
So I get the sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.